friends and neighbors, let me introduce you to a man who comes from Texas, but he remembers Nashville the way it used to be back in the years when real country music was played in this town. We're talking about the days of people like Roy Acuff, people like Lattie Moore, people like Cowboy Copas, people like Randy Hughes. They were playing around here in Nashville, and this man was right there, and we're so happy to have him here in the show with us. He actually lives over in California, so this is a one-of-a-kind visit here to our studio, Music City, USA. This is my pleasure to introduce you to a man who played bass for Mr. Cowboy Copas. We're talking about Mr. Hardy Day. Hardy, it's wonderful to have you here in the studio with us this morning.
Thanks for the opportunity to make a lot of new friends here by means of the airwaves, and it's almost like stepping into a spaceship and going back in time 60 years to, I can almost see Hank Williams on the stage there with maybe 4 or 5 encores.
We were actually, last night, actually Tuesday night, we were at the Roberts Western World downtown in Nashville, and Ike Johnson and Scott Eisnagel and their band were playing, and that's when I met Mr. Day for the first time, and it sure was my pleasure to meet him. You know, we talked about this. He's not going to be in town for long, but happily we have him here in the studio with us this morning, Music City, USA, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Mr. Day's life and about all his memories of the days with Cowboy Copas, with people like Randy Hughes, too, which was a good friend of yours as well. But first of all, I was wondering, you were born in Texas.
Right.
How were you first attracted to country music?
Of course, that was most of the music in Texas, and of course, Bob Wills was king in Texas, but the Grand Ole Opry was up even, and so naturally to hear people on the radio, it looked like a glamorous, wonderful way of life.
So it was basically through the radio that you first listened to country music, or did you have records in your household?
Mostly radio.
Mostly radio?
Even the battery-operated radios back those days.
One of those old radios that never goes wrong. But you played bass with Cowboy Copas, but how did you take up the bass? Why that instrument?
Of course, there's a lot of competition back in the late 40s for jobs on the Grand Ole Opry. There was more people than there were jobs. And of course, there's more guitar players than bass players, so with matter of necessity, I learned to play the bass and got some experience with different places around town and met a lot of good people, and of course, make good friends and good people is what it's all about.
And that's how you got to Nashville from Texas. Was it? Did you move to town for a musical reason, or how did you first got to Nashville?
Yes, naturally, I wanted to see what it's all about, so the best way to find out what goes on is to come take a look, and it was an experience, and it was one that I wouldn't want to do again, but it was a wonderful experience, and the important thing is that having been exposed to so many good people and good friends and good experiences on the road, although traveling on the road is a hard way to make a living.
Yeah, we need to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, how do you remember those very first days you spent in Nashville?
There was no inflation back then. You could ride a bus all over town for a nickel and telephone call for a nickel, and the town was heated mostly by coal. It was a little bit dirty, dusty. But it was, the Grand Ole Opry was the main drawing card for tourists, and there was always a long line out at the Ryman Auditorium, several blocks long, to get in every Saturday night.
So what about, what year more or less, what point in time are we talking about here?
In the middle, late 40s.
That was probably one of the golden ages of the Grand Ole Opry.
Right. They were celebrating about their 25th anniversary back then, and about that time, Hank Williams came to town, and Cowboy Copas was a member of the Pee Wee King band at that time.
And then he struck out on his own.
After Tennessee Waltz and Tragic Romance and Tennessee... After he had a few hits, he struck out on his own and organized his own band, and he was on the road with the various sidemen musicians for a lot of years, a couple of years, and finally the opportunity came up that he had parted his band, and he needed somebody to go on the road. And when I asked for an audition, he said, after the show, we'll give you an audition. And after the show was over, he said, well, get your clothes packed and your bass pedal on top of the car, and we're going to Kansas. And I said, well, what about the audition? He said, you don't have to worry about that. Dale Potter's already talked to me.
Okay.
Dale Potter put the stamp of approval on me.
Well, whatever Dale Potter said then was taken for granted.
Dale Potter was one of the great ones. He was one of the nicest people you could ever hope to know, and a great fiddle player. I mean, he played double string harmony, and he was really something special.
So, did you actually get to tour with him, with Dale Potter?
A lot of years, yeah, and that's what it's all about. The road work is hard work, but having good friends and good people to work with is what it's all about. Get into a small town and walk up down the streets window shopping, and that's about the most excitement of the road life. But
yeah, well, this is something we need to talk about. Mr. Hardy Day right here in the studio with us this morning on Music City, USA. It's our pleasure to have you here. You were talking about life on the road back in the 1940s, 1950s, and I'm sure life on the road had to be a lot different back then than it is right now with airplanes and buses and all that. What do you remember about those days on the road with Cowboy Copas?
it was quite routine. Most everybody had the same routine. Hank Williams, Cowboy Copas. Everybody would leave town after the Grand Ole Opry was finished on a Saturday night, would leave and drive all night and maybe wind up in Missouri or Kansas. And once we'd get to a certain place, it was a variety of places that we would work at. For an example, the drive-in theater was a popular place back then. We would go to a drive-in theater that had a flat roof on the projection room and use that for a stage, and people come and see a movie and see a country western show, and after the show go out and sell songbooks and records and pictures and sign autographs and visit with people, and just right on the front line of visiting with people and getting to know them. And that was the best part of the road work. Otherwise, traveling is a different town every night. The next night we might play at a big auditorium or maybe a movie theater or maybe a nightclub. It was a big variation of anywhere that needed entertainment. Well, somebody was there to put on a show for them.
Well, I'm sure that you were talking about tours that you did riding on a car and also playing one-nighters mostly. You didn't get to stay in a town for a long period of time, or did you?
Right. Usually get in town, say, mid-afternoon and walk around for a couple hours and be time to put on our cowboy clothes and get on stage. And usually a show would last about an hour. And depending on whether some nights at a big auditorium would have only one show. But sometimes we'd go to a movie theater and we'd play on stage and maybe a 45-minute show, and then they'd have a movie, and then go back and play another 45 minutes, and they'd have another movie. So that's sort of a overall picture of life on the road. And of course, here again, like I say, the friends and people travel with, that's what it was all about. And I was lucky to have such a nice bunch of people. We had a guy by the name of Lazy Jim Day, the guy that did Singing Hughes back then, and he was so funny that it kept life interesting. He was really funny.
Well, he was one of the best comedians on the Grand Ole Opry. I remember that Jimmy Martin once wrote a song about the Grand Ole Opry called the Grand Ole Opry Song, and he was mentioning all the different artists on there, people like Cowboy Copas, for example, or Bill Monroe, or Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, and one of the people that he mentioned was Bradley Kincaid, and another one was Lazy Jim Day.
Well, Lazy Jim Day, well, he was an old-timer, he was a trooper, and being on the road, there's not too much to look forward to. Probably one of the biggest things we had to look forward to. Lazy Jim was always looking for signs that sat where they advertised country ham and red-eyed gravy and hot biscuits, and so those are the kind of places that we live from one good restaurant to the next.
Good old down-home country cooking.
And with, of course, grits back then. But the red-eyed gravy and biscuits, that was the main key. That always got our attention.
Mr. Hardy Day here in the studio with us this morning, and you played bass for Cowboy Copas for several years, and how about listening to one of Cowboy Copas' songs before going on with the talk?
That would be great, because there's no better people in the world than Cowboy Copas. In fact, most people are most interested in, they ask me, what kind of person was Cowboy Copas? Well, I don't think he ever had an enemy in the world. He was very honest, he was very likable, he was trustworthy, and he was just plain mellow, easygoing, just nice people. I mean, everybody that ever knew him would agree that he was one of the greatest of all nice, good people.
Well, we'll get a chance to talk about Cowboy more in depth later on in the show. Right now, I would like to go back to the year of 1947. This song was written by Pee Wee King and Red Stewart. Apparently, they were riding down the highway, probably down a country road, more likely, sometime in the mid-1950s, and all of a sudden, Bill Monroe came on the radio, and he was singing the Kentucky Waltz, and Pee Wee King and Red Stewart thought, well, how about writing a Tennessee Waltz? And they did. They wrote that song while riding in a car, something that you should not do if you're listening to this broadcast, but they did, and this is one of the most classic songs in the history of country music. And apparently they wrote the lyrics on a cigar carton, like a cigar box. They had a box of cigars there, and they didn't have any paper, so they just wrote the lyrics on there. And this was a huge hit record for Pee Wee King. Of course, Roy Acuff also recorded this, and people like Patty Page in the pop field also had big hits with this song. We're talking about one of the state songs of Tennessee, my favorite state song, by the way. And this one's called the Tennessee Waltz. Mr. Cowboy Copas to sing it.
I was waltzing with my darling to the Tennessee Waltz when an old friend I happened to see introduced him to my loved one, and while they were waltzing, my friend stole my sweetheart from me. I remember that night and the Tennessee Waltz. Now I know just how much I have lost. Yes, I lost my little darling the night they were
Music City, USA, here on WRVU Nashville, going back to the year of 1947, a song written by Pee Wee King and his vocalist, Mr. Red Stewart, and this is probably my favorite version of the Tennessee Waltz. That was Cowboy Copas to sing it. That was a million seller back in 1947, a number 3 hit. I can't believe that didn't get to a number 1 position in the charts, but that was a fine King recording by the great Cowboy Copas. In the studio with us this morning, Mr. Hardy Day. He played bass for Cowboy Copas, and we're talking about Cowboy a little bit. We're talking about Mr. Day's life as well. It sure was an interesting life, both on the road and off the road. We're very proud to have him here on Music City, USA. My name is Cowboy Anton. You're listening to WRVU Nashville, the voice of Vanderbilt University, here at 91.1 FM. And talking about Cowboy Copas, you said that he was a very trustworthy person, that he was an all-around nice guy. Well, how was he as a boss?
He was, like I say, a man of his word, and he was fun to be with. He was just one of the gang. He wasn't sophisticated or snobbish at all. He was just down-to-earth, plain good, nice people, and he treated everybody nice, and he was a great entertainer. He was tall, and he wore immaculate, flashy clothing, and of course his Western cowboy hat and his boots, and he was very colorful and put on a good show, and people liked him. He did a good job of singing and had some good songs and had a lot of good hits, and he had a lot of dry seasons.
Yeah, and you were saying before that after the show, the band and Cowboy Copas would just mingle with the crowd. And this is something that I've always found very appealing about country music. It is that, like many rock stars, country stars did mingle with the people. They knew that their fans, the audience, was the reason why they were popular and why they were making some money. Although we will talk a little bit more about the money later on. But I've always found that very endearing in country music. The fact that country singers would mingle with the crowd after the show.
Right, and of course, being a musician, all the band members were expected after the show to take an armload of songbooks and pictures and records and go out to the front where the people were mingling, and a lot of people would buy pictures and songbooks and records and take them to each member of the band and Cowboy Copas, and everybody signed their autograph to them, and so the people would go home with a treasure of a lot of personal autographs, and they had their money's worth. They were happy, and of course the cash proceeds from these sales probably helped pay some of the gasoline and hotel rooms and some of the expenses on the road. And back about that period of time in the late 40s, the music business had a big change and a big challenge. And probably the latter part of 40s, television kind of got started a little bit, and then it changed over, and once television came in, a lot of people, it was hard to get people away from the television to come out and see a show, but everything worked out fine, and all is well that ends well. So,
do you remember if Cowboy Copas performed much on television or not?
I do remember the very beginning of television. It was so funny to sit down and have makeup put on my face. I didn't know. That's hard to get used to, but it did make a big difference the way they come across on television, and it was probably one of the high points of my life to see myself on television.
Oh yeah, well, that's one thing that makes a difference in television that is really different from radio. You don't need no makeup to be on radio.
Right.
Now, did you actually get to record with Cowboy Copas, or did you only back him up on the road?
Most of the band that worked with him on the road didn't have the opportunity to record because he worked for the King Records in Cincinnati, and they had their style studio band that was on retainer. They paid a flat salary, so they didn't see the cause to pay union scale for outside musicians. So even Dale Potter, the greatest of all great fiddle players, he didn't get to play.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it had a lot to do with monetary reasons, with money, not really with musicianship at all.
Right, it was strictly a business operation and keep the overhead low.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that people don't usually realize many times, that the same band that recorded in the studio was not the same band that went out with the stars on the package tours or on their personal appearances. But usually when you went out to do a show with Cowboy Copas or with any other performer, but especially with Cowboy Copas, were there any other artists on the bill, or was it just Cowboy Copas?
The Cowboy always believed in giving people the money's worth in entertainment when they paid their admission, and of course Lazy Jim Day, he was the show comedian, and he was funny. I mean, he did the singing news and told jokes, and he was just a natural-born comedian. So, and a lot of times they'd have maybe somebody like Billy Starr or somebody going to shows with us. And I remember later on, Randy Hughes and Cowboy Copas, his daughter, they were married, and so they traveled on the road with us.
Uh-huh.
And so here again, it was an opportunity for people to get their money's worth that paid their admission, and a lot of people probably wondering if the musicians out having so much fun got rich playing music. Well, it was, of course, the furthest thing from that. When I first started with Copas back in the late 40s, the union scale for roadmen, for side musicians on the road, was $10 a day. Of course, the band leaders paid the hotel rooms. Then, remember, the union had a meeting one day, and they decided to double the pay scale for sidemen, and I thought, that's terrible, that we'll all be without a job. Nobody could afford us. But when they went from $10 a day to $20 a day, everybody kept their jobs, so all was well that ends well.
Well, think about that, $10 a day with a band like Cowboy Copas, one of the foremost recording artists of that era in country music, and not only in country music, but I would say in any other field of music here in America. $10 a day, it was very clear that you were not doing this for the money.
You're right. We got to see a lot of country, make a lot of friends, and the people we work with had to get along with each other, and that was, for an example, here in Nashville at the moment, have one of the band members is left still alive from back those days, Howard White.
Uh-huh.
Howard and I worked together, and we're still friends today after 50 years.
So those friendships that you made back then while working for Cowboy Copas, they still last a lifetime.
Right. In fact, just 3 or 4 years back, we had lunch with, Howard and I had lunch with Kathy Copas, the Cowboy's daughter, and Randy Hughes' widow. So those were the good old days, but at least we've still got the music here to stay, and the music is still with us.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Well now, Hardy, I was wondering, if you were not doing this for the money, why were you doing it at all?
It would, naturally, everybody thought it would be a great glamorous life to be on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium with the bright lights, and it was a great thrill. There's something about the Ryman. I remember the back door, all the musicians went in, and that was, once you got inside, there's Roy Acuff and Eddie Arnold, and great people, and it was just an exciting life. I mean, it was the atmosphere, perhaps you could say.
That was probably the glamorous part as opposed to life on the road.
Once you get on the road, well, it's a long road in and out of Nashville.
Mr. Hardy Day on the studio with us this morning here on WRVU Nashville. You're listening to Music City, USA. My name is Cowboy Anton, and we're really enjoying the talk with Mr. Hardy Day here on Music City, USA. And before we go on with more talking, we'll let the music do the talking now. And Hardy, you have chosen this next song by Cowboy Copas. I'm going to tell you that the first time I heard this song was not by Cowboy Copas, but by Jim Reeves. He also recorded this song. It was not a big seller for Cowboy Copas. We're talking about a song called Breeze, Blow My Baby Back to Me. And I was wondering, is there any special reason why you like this song?
Well, I just like the flow of it. It's nice and smooth and easy going, and it, like I said, wasn't a big seller. He didn't do it much on the road. On the road shows, he always did Filipino Baby and Tragic Romance and Signed, Sealed, and Delivered, and so this just happens to be one of my favorite, and I do want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to hear it again myself. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's a great song, and even though it was not a big seller, I can tell you that back in 1947, when it was first released, it actually got to number 12. It barely missed the top 10.
Really? I didn't realize that.
We're going to listen to it right now here on Music City, USA. Cowboy Copas and a song called Breeze, Blow My Baby Back to Me.
It's an ill wind that blows nobody good, blows nobody good, they say. It's an ill wind that blows nobody good, 'cause it blew my gal away. Breeze, you blew my gal away. I've had the blues all day since early dawn. Early dawn, you came on whispering through the trees, little breeze. When I woke up this morning, she was gone. Yes, she's gone. Breeze, you blew her from my side. She was my blushing bride. Oh, hear my plea, hear my plea. Hear me begging you upon my knees. Blow her back, sweet evening breeze. Blow my baby back to me. It's an ill wind that blows nobody good, blows nobody good, they say. I said a little prayer right down on my knees. It blew her back to me. Breeze, you blew my gal away. I've had the blues all day since early dawn. Early dawn, you came on whispering through the trees, little breeze. When I woke up this morning, she was gone. Yes, she's gone. Breeze, you blew her from my side. She was my blushing bride. Oh, hear my plea, hear my plea. Hear me begging you upon my knees. Blow her back, sweet evening breeze. Blow my baby back to me.
A fantastic song by Cowboy Copas right here on Music City, USA, and a favorite of Hardy Day, who played bass with Cowboy Copas for many years, and he is in the studio with us this morning, sharing all his memories about Mr. Copas and about their life on the road and about all the other artists that he bumped into back in those days when country music was the way we would want it to still be nowadays. That's what I think. This song we just heard, a number 12 hit record in 1947 for Cowboy Copas, Breeze, Blow My Baby Back to Me. Now, Hardy, I was thinking, how did you wind up playing on the Grand Ole Opry? How did that happen?
Well, I mentioned earlier that more guitar players than there were jobs, so in order to get a job, I had to learn to play the bass, and so when an opening became available with Cowboy Copas, I was there ready, and by having Dale Potter was already a member of the band, and Dale Potter was highly respected, and he was really a remarkably nice, easygoing guy. He was easy. Everybody liked him, and he was a great musician. He played really great fiddle. So when Dale recommended to Copas that I was one of the good guys, I didn't even have one audition. Copas says, just get your bass fiddle and tie it on the roof, and we're leaving town.
Well, what do you remember about a show at the Grand Ole Opry at the Ryman Auditorium back when it was held there downtown at the Ryman Auditorium? What was it like that you can remember? What were those shows like?
They lasted about 4 hours from 8 to 12, and of course I can remember long lines of people down the Broadway and around the corner, and of course most of the musicians always went out the back door to Tootsie's and had a refreshment and back and ready to play the next number. And I remember I took a couple of years out when I was drafted in the Army, and I got out of the Army, and I had some time on my hand between time to get my job back with Cowboy Copas, and during that period of time, while I was in the Army, Hank Williams had died.
So that was probably around 1953, or just
52.
about. 52, 53.
Yeah, and then in 53, Audrey Williams decided to take a band on the road and take advantage of some of the momentum that Hank had, and so I was a member of the Audrey Williams band for a period of about 3 months, and so that was another experience, and of course had an opportunity to get to know Hank real well, hanging around the dressing rooms and hallways, and Hank was he was a nice guy also.
So you actually did some touring with Hank, or
no? Just had a good friend, Jerry Rivers, that played the fiddle with him. And Jerry was one of my best buddies, and so Jerry always kept me up to date on how big of crowds they had and how things were going. And of course, Hank probably was very close to the top as far as getting encores. I remember he would sometimes get on 4 or 5 times but called back to the stage. People just wouldn't let him sit down. The only show that perhaps exceeded him a little bit, is pretty close probably, was Bob Wills.
Oh yeah.
At one time Bob Wills came in with about a dozen guys, and they all had white shirts and Levi's and Western hats, and really looked sharp and organized to perfection, and Bob Wills got so many encores that people quit counting.
Well, that sure was very different, very exciting kind of music with the Western swing style that Bob Wills was popularizing in the 40s.
Yes, the San Antonio Rolls had lots of energy and a lot of good rhythm, and of course Bob specialized in playing dances.
Oh yeah.
So there was something magnetic about Bob Wills. He'd point his fiddle at a musician, and just an ordinary musician would all of a sudden play great, or some energy or something that.
Some kind of magic that he had.
It was definitely magic. You said it. It was a great experience to see Bob Wills work. And he always had his trademark where he smoked a cigar. He had one in his mouth. It probably wouldn't live, but he was a great showman.
So one of the things that, and I always say this, so people usually listening to the show will probably find this repetitive, but what I think about Bob Wills, and I always give him a lot of credit because he was a great band leader, and he always gave a lot of credit to the people that he worked with.
Right.
People like Leon McAuliffe or Al Strickland on piano, for example, And for me, that's very important. Very good thing about a Bob Wills record is, besides the ahas that he would throw in, he would always, whenever there was a solo on those recordings, he would always cry out the name of the person taking the solo. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, he was that way. He liked to give people credit, and in fact, since we're talking about Bob Wills, probably one of the greatest thrills of my lifetime was having to play bass fiddle for about an hour in his band.
Oh, wow, that is really something. So you played bass for Bob Wills?
Just to sit in, just a jam session, and, well, it was at a dance, but I had a good friend, Billy Bowman, who used to be on the Grand Ole Opry, and Billy Bowman was a steel guitar player, and one night I was visiting their dance at a small West Texas town, and Billy said, well, Billy Bowman invited me up to sit in for an hour, and that was truly a wonderful experience.
Well, I guess it must have been, and I'm sure you played, did you play ballrooms with Cowboy Copas as well?
Not that much. Occasionally we'd play a nightclub, but mostly theaters and drive-ins, and we used to play a lot of country picnics, kind of like in Pennsylvania that have a country park, and people would bring in their chicken and picnic basket, and it had a stage with country music, usually a different Grand Ole Opry star each weekend or something, and so this was a great exposure to play on a Sunday afternoon in a park in Pennsylvania or something.
Oh yeah, I'm sure, but it must have been really different than playing in a ballroom.
Yes, well, yeah, it was. I mean, people in a theater, they like more a variety. They like some comedy, they like an instrumental, and they like to hear the star of the show, Cowboy Copas, sing, and of course, with the Bob Wills band, they played mostly dance music, and so they had to have a lot of rhythm to get people on the floor to dance. But at the time, a few times Bob did play on the Grand Ole Opry at the Ryman Auditorium, and he was a great hit, and he was the only thing that exceeded Hank Williams.
And I believe that the first time that Bob Wills played on the Grand Ole Opry, they didn't want any drums on there.
There was some controversy about that.
I've always wondered why the Grand Ole Opry was so opposed to drums in country music.
It was a tradition of banjos and fiddles and guitars and bass, and so you come in with. There was also a transition that the Opry had to go through to kind of get used to amplified electric guitars and steel guitars, but I understand at one time they even had to put the drums behind a curtain so the audience didn't see it. I guess they didn't want their reputation.
That's what I've heard, that, they played drums, but the drums were set behind the curtain so that people wouldn't see it, so that people would not protest because drums were on the Grand Ole Opry. I guess what the Grand Ole Opry was aiming at was the kind of sound that Roy Acuff had in his band.
Right, and of course Roy Acuff was a great person, and I was lucky enough to know some of the people in his band. For an example, I used to do some road shows with Robert Lund and Big Howdy Foster.
Oh, yeah.
But he was one of the great fiddle players. He worked on the road with Cowboy Copas for a period of time, and I toured the road shows with Big Howdy Foster in the band. So between Dale Potter and Big Howdy Foster, I was lucky to have two of the world's greatest fiddle players and be exposed to playing the same band with them.
Oh, yeah. Those sure were fine musicians that you're talking about. You were yourself, Mr. Hardy Day, here in the studio with us this morning. You played bass for Cowboy Copas for many years. It's our pleasure to have him here on Music City, USA. We'll be right back after this little message. Cell phones are great tools, but be smart when you're driving. Never dial or text when you're driving, and keep calls short. For more tips, go to wirelesssafety.org. That's wirelesssafety.org. Brought to you by WRVU and CTIA, the Wireless Association. And if you like the kind of country music we're playing right here on WRVU Nashville, right here on Music City, USA, check out the Hillbilly Jamboree. It's going to be with you through the summer, every Tuesday night from 6 to 8 p.m. My friends Randy and Kels are going to be taking care of it as usual, playing the very best in hillbilly, rockabilly, and all kinds of country music. Pete Wilson from Nashville Jumps is likely to show up with his own records as well. It's a lot of fun, a great show, and some fine country and hillbilly music right here on WRVU Nashville every Tuesday night from 6 to 8 p.m. on WRVU Nashville 91.1 FM. It's 10:56 and you're listening to WRVU Nashville 91.1 FM. Some fine steel guitar right there. That was Tommy Sargent going back to 1946 and a great swinging instrumental called the Sargent's Stomp right here on Music City, USA. It's 11 o'clock and you're listening to WRVU Nashville 91.1 FM.
sister was that old sweetheart of mine. When he heard my story to me, he then said, the one you left there has a long time been dead. She waited so long for the day you'd return, but why you had left her she never did learn. Now I am the man whom you saw that fatal night, wrapped in the arms of my sister so tight. She loved you so dearly, but you broke her heart. Oh, stranger, forevermore you must part.
Music City, USA, here on WRVU Nashville. That was Tragic Romance, going back to 1945. This was a fine King recording from Cowboy Copas, a song written by, of all people, the great Grandpa Jones. He wrote this song, and Cowboy Copas made it into a pretty good-sized hit. And it's one of my favorite songs by Cowboy Copas. He was probably not the biggest hit he had, but it's undoubtedly one of my favorite songs that he ever recorded. Cowboy Copas. Also one of my favorite singers from 1940s and 1950s. And sometimes I believe he doesn't get as much credit as he deserves. But this morning here in the studio with us is Mr. Hardy Day, who played bass fiddle for Cowboy Copas. And he played on the Grand Ole Opry as well. And he toured with Copas. And it's our pleasure to have him here in the studio with us on Music City, USA. Well, Hardy, we were talking about many people during the first part of this interview, but one of them was Mr. Jerry Rivers, and that's another fiddle player that sometimes doesn't get as much credit as he deserves, but he was a fantastic fiddle player, and he used to be with Hank Williams. He was part of the Great Drifting Cowboy Band. So, you said you knew him personally.
Yeah, he and I used to be good buddies. We'd chase around, hang out together around town here and there, and occasionally he'd say, well, we've got to drop by Hank's house, stop by and say hello. And I remember one time we dropped by and there was a baby on the couch there crying quite loud, and neither Hank nor his mother paid much attention to him, but Hank Williams Jr.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, there's not too many people left above ground from those days, but I understand that Don Helms, the steel guitar player for Hank Williams, is still doing well here in Nashville. I didn't know him personally, but...
Yeah, I've talked to him several times, and he is another very nice guy, and he is always willing to reminisce about the old days with Hank Williams. And once again, one of the things that I like about Don Helms is that he could play the straight steel, not the pedal steel, just as best as anybody else in the business. And I love his playing, and he's also a wonderful man.
He had a unique styling, a unique technique that was his trademark, and this did a big push to Hank's talent also. It was kind of like the frosting on the cake for Hank's good talent.
Even when when Don Helms played a pedal steel, it still sounded like a straight steel for some reason. He had a very, very personal style. And I think that, and I don't know if you agree with this, but one of the things about country music back in the 40s and 50s and before is that each artist had his own personal style.
Right, and remember, talking about steel guitar players, Jerry Bird was real popular in Nashville with his own unique styling, and one of the guys that's still living here that's doing well and really a young guy still is Billy Robinson.
Okay.
Billy Robinson was on the Red Foley program, and by the way, to give Billy a little plug here, he's also a member of the Steel Guitar Hall of Fame.
Oh, okay.
And he does a good job, and there's a guy by the name of Jack Bowles that played bass fiddle. He's still doing well in Nashville, and still a few of us left here, and of course Howard White, he plays steel guitar with Cowboy Copas, and he didn't use the pedal either. He has Howard was unique in as much as he got a good, clear, crystal tone out of his guitar playing.
Oh, yeah.
And he was he's after 50 years, he and I are still good friends.
That's a wonderful thing to hear. And, of course, there's something about the straight steel guitar, the one that does not have a pedal, that I like especially. I don't know if it's the tone or the sound of it, but I've always favored the lap steel guitar or the non-pedal steel guitar much more than the pedal steel. But after all, steel guitar is one of my favorite instruments in country music, and it has played a big part in making country music what it is.
I agree.
Nowadays.
I agree with you. It's one of my favorite instruments, and it adds a lot to the best of them.
Oh yeah, there it is. And you said that you'd played on the Grand Ole Opry with Cowboy Copas, but have you actually played the Grand Ole Opry with other artists besides Cowboy Copas, or just with Cowboy?
Back in the good old days, every 15-minute segment of the opera we played on, we got $7 extra, so I was eager and anxious to make as many $7 bills as I could get a hold of. So remember, especially when I got out of the Army back in '53, that
You're talking about 1953, maybe that man from Glendale, Arizona?
yeah,
Marty Robbins?
Marty Robbins just got here. Excuse me, but anyway, Marty had just got him started on the Grand Ole Opry, and he didn't have a band yet. So he would have a 15-minute program, and he'd say, okay, I want you and you and you. And so I'd pick up a guitar and go from bass to rhythm guitar, and I'd make another $7 by playing, accompanying Marty Robbins. So got a chance to know Marty good. He was quite a unique guy. When he first got here, he would be introduced and just walk up to the microphone and start singing. He didn't say anything. He didn't. But later on, I guess he did begin to talk to the crowd. But he was a great talent. He was such a great high degree of skill and good voice. And here again, he was a nice guy. He was good people.
Well, his voice had a lot of range. He could sing just about any kind of music he wanted. He did some Hawaiian music. He did pop and rockabilly and straight country music. He did everything.
And of course, he got on to the Western Gunslinger.
Oh, yeah.
Made big time.
Yeah, those records like El Paso.
Right. Streets of Laredo.
Streets of Laredo, Meet Me Tonight in Laredo, and all those songs that he did, the Gunfighter Ballads and Trail songs. So you were actually friends with him.
Well, yeah, after backing him up for quite a few months, well, it took a while for him to get a band together, and of course, to have a band to go on the road, you have to pay the money, so he didn't have the financial resources to pay his band. So, of course, when the musicians that accompanied him on the Grand Ole Opry, they each one made $7 for a 15-minute segment. This was back in the early 50s.
Yeah, and I believe those were the days when you could actually get on the Grand Ole Opry without having a hit record. Because I don't think Marty had a hit record in 1953 when he first appeared on the Grand Ole Opry. I may be wrong, but I think Stonewall Jackson, for example, was one of those guys who did not have a hit record, but he still played on the Grand Ole Opry, and his performance on the Grand Ole Opry actually helped him build a big following and get hits.
That's right, and it was common that if you did have a big hit, for an example, Hank Williams, his road to the Grand Ole Opry was Love Sick Blues.
Oh yeah, apparently he got like an 8 encore.
Right.
First time he sang Love Sick Blues on the show.
Right, and he did a good job of it, and it was very timely, and people bought it. People liked it. It was a good combination.
Yeah, of course, that song, Lovesick Blues, is a rare example because Hank Williams did not write that song. It was a big hit in the 1920s for a guy by the name of Emmett Miller, a vaudevillian. And Hank Williams actually revived that song in the late 40s. And I believe it was around 1948, 1949, and he made a huge hit out of that old song. Mr. Hardy Day here in the studio with us this morning on Music City, USA. It's our pleasure to have him and sharing all his memories about different people like Cowboy Copas, and Jerry Rivers, and Marty Robbins. And how about Mr. Randy Hughes? I believe you were friends with Randy Hughes, who actually made some fine recordings before he tragically died in that plane crash that also took the lives of Cowboy Copas and Patsy Cline. So what do you remember about Randy?
Randy and I both had, same as most other musicians on the Grand Ole Opry, we had a parallel type life. We played at some of the bars and nightclubs, and over a period of long period of time, Randy and I got to know each other real good, and Randy was lucky. I got drafted in the Army and spent 2 years. Randy got drafted and spent a few months, and he got out of the Army because he had flat feet.
Oh, wow.
So first thing he did was he and Kathy Copas got married and traveled on the road shows with Cowboy Copas.
So he used to travel on the road with Cowboy Copas. Did he open for Cowboy, or what was the deal?
Usually, and then Kathy would do a few songs. Kathy made some recordings, and so they were troopers. They traveled on the road, and this was back in the early 50s. In the late 40s, it was just Cowboy Copas and Jim Day and Dale Potter and myself and Howard White. So anyway, those were the good old days, and like I say, it's like going back in a time ship to 60 years.
Well, we're very happy that you agreed to go back in time to take this journey with us here on Music City, USA this morning, and share all your memories about those good old days of country music spent with all those wonderful musicians that used to travel with yourself and Cowboy Copas and the rest of the bunch. And Randy Hughes, I don't know if you're aware of this, but he made some recordings too.
No, I wasn't aware of it, but I left Nashville in the mid-50s, and after a few years on the road, I had road burnout, so I had an opportunity to go to Indianapolis and work in a nightclub for a guy with the name of Lattie Moore.
Oh yeah, we will be talking about Lattie Moore a little later on in the show, because I would like to also play a song by Lattie.
Good. Well, he was a great one, and it was, for me, it was a timely relief from the road to just being in the same place for a few months.
Oh yeah, we were talking before that you would usually do one-nighters, so
right.
being at the same place for a longer period of time, I'm sure it was quite a big relief for anybody traveling in those days.
Right, having been in a different town every day and packing up and unpacking, it soon got road burnout.
All right, well, I guess it's time to listen to Randy Hughes sing right now. We've listened to Cowboy Copas before, but Randy Hughes, he actually recorded for several labels, but some of his best recordings were done right here in town, right here in Nashville.
By the way, a point of interest, in case some of the listeners might not be familiar with it, Randy was the manager for Patsy Cline.
He was the manager, and he was also flying the plane that crashed that tragic night when 3 of them passed away.
Yes, you're right, and it was a bad thunderstorm, and the thunderstorm required more than his limited flying experience, and it was a great tragedy.
It sure was a big tragedy for country music, for the music world in general. Some great performers passed away that night. We'll probably be talking a little more about that night a little later on see what you remember of it. But before that, we're going to be listening to Randy Hughes now. He made some recordings that are really good. This particular recording we're going to play was done here in town for a label that was very popular in the 1950s. They made some great records. I'm talking about Bullet Records. And Randy Hughes recorded this song back in, I believe, the mid to late 1950s. And because of the theme in the song, this song was banned from airplay back in the day. We're talking about Randy Hughes, who's going to be singing a song called "Tapping That Thing." Well, and as good a rhythm guitar player as he was, back then, back when country music did not rely on drums for the rhythm, it relied a lot more on the rhythm guitar and the bass fiddle that you played. I guess that a very important part of country music back then, especially without the drums, was the rhythm section.
Right.
And, well, of course you were part of it. How important do you think it was as a player to have a good rhythm guitar player and a good bass fiddle player?
Well, that was the basic of all the music, was the rhythm, and we had a lot of good rhythm guitar players. For an example, Ray Eddington is a rhythm guitar player, and Ray lives out on Hickory Lake. He's did a lot of road shows, a lot of road work with Ray, and he's one of the great ones for rhythm guitar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's as we were talking. That was really an important part of a country band back then.
Right.
Another one of your good friends, I believe, is Lattie Moore. We were talking about him before, and I didn't know he was still alive.
Yeah, he's doing well. He's been kind of through a sausage grinder, had a couple open heart surgeries, but he's doing well now, and I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he says that he's highly honored because on his birthday was declared a holiday by his hometown, Franklin, Kentucky.
That's good to hear.
And he mentioned the fact that in Europe that he gets lots of communication from Europe. Apparently his records are selling really fast in Europe now.
Well, as a European myself, I can tell you that there are parts of Europe, especially in the north of Europe and Germany, of course in the British Isles, where country music, as we know it, I mean traditional country music, is very popular. And I believe that has something to do with it, with the fact that his records are selling over there.
Right, and of course this is all made possible by the Bear Foundation, the Bear family.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That's a really good reissue label, and I think they're doing a lot of good to the legacy of country music by re-releasing that fantastic array of recordings and CDs, and the only way that Germans could do it, very well done, and they do it in a very complete fashion, and I think that's important. As a collector myself, I'm always happy to know that people are out there are caring enough about the legacy of country music to issue music like that. But going back to Lattie Moore, I was wondering, the first time I heard him was about 5 or 6 years ago when I bought a compilation of his 1950s and early 60s recordings. And reading the liner notes, I realized that he was not a big seller back in the 1950s. But if you listen to the records, he was a fantastic singer and a great songwriter too.
He was a good singer. So it wasn't so much how good you are as the breaks you get and the songs you get if you're lucky enough to get the right song. I was lucky in as much as I got to know Lattie when Copas was playing shows in Indianapolis. And after I got road burnout of too much traveling on the road, I had the opportunity to work in Indianapolis in a nightclub with Lattie, and so after a year or so, does a good job and a good singer, and he's still a good friend today, 50 years later.
Oh yeah, and listening to his older recordings from the 50s and 60s, you can tell that he had a very powerful, a very country voice. And that's something that I really like about him is, his delivery is really perfect. And the records that he made are solid country music. So I am astonished that he did not sell more records than he did. Is he bitter about that fact, or does he just laugh about it? Nowadays, I mean. About the fact that he didn't sell as many records as other people back then.
Well, of course, he knows that the record label that you're with has a lot to do with it also. A record label can make or break an artist. So that's important, and he just wasn't that lucky back then, but he's lucky now to be alive. He's up in his 80s, and so he's doing real well. The last time I talked to him, his voice had a strong enthusiasm, and he's doing really well health-wise.
That's good to hear. Really good to hear. Did you actually get to tour with him, or you just played with him that engagement in Indianapolis?
He and I were good friends. We'd go fishing together and pal around together in the daytime and work at the nightclub at night, and so we were real good friends.
All right, well, we're going to play a record by that good friend of yours, by Mr. Lattie Moore. And he recorded this song in the 1950s. Of course, your favorite song, probably the most popular that he ever had, was a song called Juke Joint Johnny. And I know you like that song. Unfortunately, I don't have it here with me today. I know I have it among my record collection, but I don't know why, but I didn't bring it today. So another song that, in this case, you chose yourself is one called Under a Mexico Moon. And this will probably be close to your heart since you live part of the year in Mexico.
Right.
In Baja California, right?
Right, and I can relate to the Mexican moon.
Oh yeah, and I can tell you, I've seen pictures of that place you got in there, and wow, you sure live in a paradise there in Baja.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to listen to the great Lattie Moore. And one of the recordings that he made in the mid-1950s, it's got sort of a Latin beat, which is normal, because we're talking about a song called Under a Mexico Moon. Here's Mr. Lattie Moore on Music City, USA this morning.
I went south of the border down Mexico. A pretty senorita set my heart aglow. At a Mexican dance, I found a sweetest romance out under a Mexico moon. The guitars were playing a rumba tune. It was Sunday night and the month was June. Cupid must have told her come a little closer as we kissed out under the moon. The chance I couldn't resist to ask her for a kiss. As I held her close, I felt her little heart miss. The twinkle in her eye, her little back was shy. She wore a yellow ribbon and a wavy hair. Pretty ruby lips as I kissed her there. Beneath the stars above, I was falling in love out under a Mexico moon. I was so all alone with no love of my own, but I was looking for love down in Mexico. I found love and romance in a song to dance, and now my heart is aglow. The guitars were playing a rumba tune. It was Sunday night and the month was June. Her arms were around me, holding me tight. I confessed my love at first sight. But she wanted to tarry when I asked her to marry. She was in love, that was plain to see. When her lips met mine, her eyes sparkled and shined out under the Mexico moon. There's gonna be a wedding in Mexico, 'cause I'm gonna make her mine. pretty moonlight night, everything is alright out under a Mexico moon.
Music City, USA, here on WRVU Nashville. That was Lattie Moore and Under a Mexico Moon. One of the very finest songs that he ever recorded. Lattie Moore was good friends and still is good friends with our special guest in the studio this morning here, Mr. Hardy Day. It's really our pleasure to have you here, and this is really a thrill to me to be talking to a legend like yourself. You've been there and done those things with all those great country singers, and that's what this radio show is all about, bringing the musicians and bringing the artists as close to the audience as possible. And I think that that was the intention of country singers back in the days when country music was exactly the way it should be, being close to the people. How big a part do you think, Hardy, that radio played in the popularization of country music over the years?
About 99 or 9/10%. Without radio, nobody would ever know about it. So radio was absolutely the big thing that made country music all the way from Jimmy Rogers on up. In the meantime, we want to thank you for carrying on the good work and spreading the good word, and thank you for the opportunity to reminisce here about the good old days.
I appreciate it. It's my pleasure to have you here. I really mean that. I can't tell you how thrilling it is for me to be, sitting here across from you, reminiscing about all those years. I'm sure, since we were talking about radio, I'm sure that besides playing on the Grand Ole Opry, you must have played a few dates on the road and then done shows on smaller radio stations when you were traveling on the road. Did that happen very often?
Not that much. As I mentioned earlier, after a few years on the road and having the opportunity to be in one place in Indianapolis, talking about Lattie Moore there, Lattie had a television show and a radio show, so we did have the opportunity to carry on with the radio and television in Indianapolis with the Lattie Moore Band. This was back in the mid-50s.
Mm-hmm. And back in the mid-50s, it was very possible for country artists to be very popular in a region of the United States but never show up on the charts. There was, I believe, a very big market, regional market, besides, what appeared on Billboard and all that. So it is very interesting sometimes to listen to records made like in East Texas, for example, or in West Texas or something like that. Records that were very popular locally and got played on jukeboxes a lot, but never made it onto the charts in the big country music mainstream back then. So I think that's a big difference between, country music back in those days and nowadays when country music is so different. What do you think about the new direction the country music has taken?
Well, number one, you're talking about the radio, and of course radio is significant to the country music's success. Like the Grand Ole Opry was the communication center for the country western artists to get the message out where they're going to be and the date and time, and so being able to communicate their tour schedule was a big thing about having a big crowd. And of course, in order to have a big crowd, that's how they gain their revenue.
Oh yeah. So did you actually do you know if for example Cowboy Copas made a lot more money on personal appearances than the band?
Not really. It just barely carried on, but barely broke even. It's kind of like a farmer. Some years you have good years, and sometimes you have a dry spell, and Copas sometimes would have a big hit and a lot of money from revenue from record commission, and then he'd have a dry spell, and but in the meantime, he had to keep his name before the public, and you do that on the road is a big significant part of selling records. So even if he just broke even, which is probably the case many times, he was still kept his name before the public with his band traveling on the road.
And I guess that the Grand Ole Opry played a big part in that, because I've read about country singers really complaining that they didn't make a lot of money on by playing on the Grand Ole Opry, but I guess they did it basically. Well, I guess number one for tradition, but also because of the exposure, right?
Well, it's like I mentioned earlier that $7 for a 15-minute segment of the Grand Ole Opry back in the early 50s and late 40s. I would assume the star got the same amount of money. $7 for 15 minutes. So that doesn't go very far to raise a family and pay the road expenses. So, but it was a tool. The radio was a tool to get communication out of where and when, and keep his name before the public. And of course, when he had a hit, well, that really helped the cash flow. People come pour in and help keep things going.
Yeah, and of course, Cowboy Copas, by the time he passed away, he was enjoying a sort of revival of his career after a few years in which he had been a little bit down in popularity, basically because of the advent of rock and roll. And I guess the appearance of rock and roll music probably hurt country music quite a lot.
Yeah, Copas would, like I say, he'd have a spell without a hit, but at his untimely death, he had just enjoyed a tremendous surge with Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he really had a big thing going, had a lot of momentum. In fact, had an occasion to visit with Pat Boone a few years back, and Pat Boone made the comment that of all the records that he'd ever made himself, that Alabama was his favorite record that he himself had made, which he made his record company made to cover the Copas hit of Alabama.
Yeah, that's what Pat Boone did a lot. He would cover a lot of different artists, both black artists and country artists as well. So he was known for that. He was a great singer, in my opinion, too.
He's got a good voice, and of all the records that he's made, a lot of records over the period of time, and he says that Alabama is his favorite record of his own personal record.
Well, that sure is a great song, and I believe that if we were to play every great record that Cowboy Copas ever made, we would need a whole slew of different shows here. We couldn't do that in only one show, but since we're doing one show right now, I think it would be a good idea to play another one of his big hits. And this is one that you seem to like very much personally. This was a number 2 hit, a million seller back in 1947. Once again, 1947, that was the same year in which Cowboy Copas recorded the Tennessee Waltz. So he had 2 million sellers in the same year, Tennessee Waltz, and this song that we're going to play right now called Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. What is it about that song that you like so much, Hardy?
It's kind of a slow, easy going love type song, and people liked it. It was very timely.
All right, we're going to listen to it right now here on Music City, USA this morning on WRVU Nashville.
Signed, sealed, and delivered. heart when you left me. You left me alone and so blue. I'm sending it special delivery. Please handle with care, it's for you. It's all that I have to offer, but darling, you know that it's true. Signed, sealed, and delivered. The postman will bring it to you. I thought perhaps you would keep it just for a while, don't you see? Oh, darling, please keep it forever. Without you, it's no good to me. Signed, sealed, and delivered. A package containing my heart. I send it to you as a token. I'm sorry we're so far apart.
You're listening to WRVU Nashville. This is Music City, USA. My name is Cowboy Anton. We have Mr. Hardy Day here in the studio with us this morning. We've been reminiscing about country music, about his life and career, back in Cowboy Copas up as a bass fiddle player. He did so for several years, and it's really our pleasure to have him here. We're really getting close to the end of this very interesting interview, and I would simply like to thank him again for being here. But back in 1955, I believe it was, you left the Cowboy Copas band. How did that happen? What were the reasons behind that?
Mainly, having been on the road several years, it got to the end of where that it was became a drudgery to get in a vehicle and ride so many hours and then unpack and play a show and on to the next town. And so when the opportunity became available to take a job in without having to be on the road, then I was voted for it, and it was quite a interesting change in life to slow down and be in the same town without having to go on the road. So this was when I worked with the band for Lattie Moore.
So you did not leave music altogether. You just left the Cowboy Copas band.
Just stayed in one place and played in a nightclub 5 or 6 nights a week, and had radio programs and TV programs, and Lattie Moore had a record shop back then, and so here again it was interesting. It was a way to make a living.
Was the money better with Lattie Moore than it was with Cowboy Copas, or it was just more comfortable because you were not traveling?
Just more comfortable without the long road drudgery of traveling so much.
So, fast forwarding a few years, about 8 years later, in 1963, we're talking about March the 5th, and if you know about the history of country music, you got to know that that was a very tragic night for country music. On March the 5th, 1963, a plane that was being flown by Randy Hughes crashed not very far away from Nashville, and inside that plane, not only Randy Hughes, but also Patsy Cline, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and Cowboy Copas were also on that plane, and they all left this world and left the country music world with a lot of grief for their loss. Now, Hardy, how do you remember that night? How did you hear about the death of Cowboy Copas?
As I recall, I read it in a newspaper, and I had I was the owner of a private business college in San Diego, and in the meantime, I had taken up flying an airplane myself, had my private pilot's license, and quite a bit of time under my belt, and after reading about the tragedy and having been such close friends with Randy and Cowboy Copas, and I didn't know Hawkshaw Hawkins, but of course he was a great talent.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know Patsy Cline, but knowing Randy, her manager, I kept up with her through visiting with Randy, and it affected me to such an extent that I went about a year without flying my airplane, and finally it wore off and I went back to flying, and so I've been flying my own airplane for the last 50 years, and I try to stay out of thunderstorms.
Oh, yeah. That's important. Whether you're driving or you're flying a plane, it's important to stay out of thunderstorms. But Hawkshaw Hawkins' career was actually gathering momentum with the recordings he was making in the early 1960s when that tragedy struck. But of course, he'd been recording since the late 1940s already, so his career was long established in country music. As far as Patsy Cline, that was another sad loss as well. She was not only a great country singer, but she was a fine pop singer as well. And, well, as far as Randy Hughes, who knows what might have laid ahead had he stayed alive and making records as good as Tapping That Thing. Did you actually stay in touch with Cowboy Copas after 1955 until his death, or how often did that happen?
Not that much, really. He was, of course, busy with his life, and I was busy with mine. Occasionally I'd talk to Howard White or Dickie Harris or some old good buddies, and I don't think we've given Dickie any credit. Dickie played the steel guitar with Ernest Tubb for probably 20 years.
Great steel player, too.
Yeah, he and I, we did a lot of work together in the nightclubs way back in the late 40s, and got to be real good friends, and Dickie still lives out east of Nashville now. And
he is well exemplified on records. He recorded quite a lot with Ernest, if I'm not mistaken. Really good steel player. As we were talking before, my favorite instrument is the steel, so I pay close attention to steel players whenever they're taking a solo. So, Hardy, if you had to choose one memory out of the many memories that you have shared and out of the many memories you have of your long career in country music as a great musician that you are, what would that be? What would be the memory that you would name if I was to ask you that?
Well, that's an easy one.
Well, I'm glad.
Simply being on the stage at the Ryman Auditorium, there's something magic, and then you add in stars like Hank Williams and Eddie Arnold and all the great ones standing, Roy Acuff standing in the side looking on, ready to go on, and so the magic of the Ryman Auditorium, has a certain magic that I can't put my finger on, but it would be hard to equal anywhere, anytime, anything.
I'm sure nothing could compare to the magic of the Ryman Auditorium backstage in the 1940s, 1950s. That must have been something else, something that can be described maybe in words, but it will never, we will never be able to live through that again, unfortunately. I'm happy that that's your best memory, because if I had been there, I'm sure that would have been mine as well. It sure was my pleasure to have you here in the studio with me, Hardy, Mr. Hardy Day here at WRVU Nashville, here in Music City, USA. I want to really thank you very much for agreeing to this interview, which was done kind of in a rush the other night when we were talking down at Roberts, and I can't tell you how happy I am that we've been able to do this.
It's been fun to reminisce, and I I want to comment and thank you for your good job. You're doing an excellent job, very prompt and professional-like, and of course you are professional. So anyway, we would thank you for the opportunity, and we hope that we've been able to enlighten, spread some information that'll be interesting.
Well, it sure was really interesting. It was really interesting for me, and I'm sure also for everybody out there listening. I really thank you once again for that, sir. We're going to finish this interview with one more record. This was a huge hit record for many people. I know that people like Texas Jim Robertson recorded this song. Red Foley as well, I believe. And, of course, Ernest Tubb also recorded this song. But we're going to listen to the Cowboy Copas version of a song that'll take us back to the World War II years, back in 1945, right at the end of World War II. One of those songs about foreign love affairs. There were a lot of those in country music. Geisha Girl, for example, by Hank Lachlan, or Fraulein by Bobby Helms. But one of my favorites is this one we're going to end this interview with Mr. Hardy Day with. This is Cowboy Copas and a song called Filipino Baby.
When the warship left Manila, sailing proudly o'er the sea, deep blue sea, all the sailors' hearts were filled with fond regret, looking backward to this island where they'd spent those happy hours, making love to every pretty girl they met. When up stepped a little sailor with his bright eyes all aglow, saying, take a look at my gal's photograph. Then the sailors gathered round him just to look upon her face, smiling face. And he said, I love my dark-faced Filipino. She's my Filipino baby, she's my treasure and my pet, loving pet. Her teeth are bright and pretty, and her hair is black as jet. Oh, her lips are sweet as honey, and her heart is pure, I know, yes I know. And he said, I love my dark-faced Filipino. Then one day he whispered, darling, I've come back from Caroline, South Carolina. I've come back to claim the only girl I love. And that night there was a wedding, while the ship's crew gathered round, all around. And he wed his little dark-faced Filipino. She's my Filipino baby, she's my treasure and my pet, loving pet, you bet. Her teeth are bright and pretty, and her hair is black as jet. Oh, her lips are sweet as honey, and her heart is pure, I know, yes I know, pure as snow. And he said, I love my dark-faced Filipino.
Music City, USA, here on WRVU Nashville. That was Moon Mulligan going back to 1946 and a song called Shoot the Moon. Wonderful steel playing there, wonderful guitar playing, and of course, Moon Mulligan on piano couldn't be any better. Wonderful music right there. Shoot the Moon, Moon Mulligan, and a song recorded in 1946. That was exactly 1 year before Cowboy Copas recorded Sign, Seal, and Deliver and the Tennessee Waltz, which became million sellers for Cowboy Copas. This will take us to the end of the show. Of course, before Moon Mulligan and Shoot the Moon, we had Cowboy Copas himself singing Filipino Baby, his highly different version than the one that Ernest Tubb recorded. Cowboy Copas and Filipino Baby, one of the classic hits from 1945. I would just like to end the show by thanking Mr. Hardy Day for agreeing to that interview that we taped yesterday right here in the studio WRVU Nashville. I hope that for everybody out there listening, it was as good an experience as it was for me to interview Mr. Hardy Day. He had many memories, many interesting stories to talk about, many very interesting things to say. And it was surely my pleasure to have him here in the studio, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. From me, from Cowboy Anton, it's time to say goodbye. Of course, if you like the same kind of country music that we played here, be sure to come back next Thursday morning for more of Music City, USA. We'll be right here. There is, as old Hank would say, if the good Lord's willing, and the creeks don't rise. And as usual, we're going to end up the show by asking Mr. Fern Young to sign it off, coming down the line on his freight train as he usually does. Until then, please have a good country weekend, and remember, if you would like to make any comment, any request, any suggestion, we got a email address that you can write to, wrvucountry@yahoo.com, wrvucountry@yahoo.com, and I check that email address just about every day, so feel free to write if you feel like it. Once again, I'm really grateful to Mr. Hardy Day. We were also enjoying the music of the great Cowboy Copas, and we listened to a couple of songs by Randy Hughes, Tapping That Thing, and the great Lattie Moore, Under a Mexico Moon. From me, from Cowboy Anton, time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for being out there. Have a great country weekend. We'll be back next week. And right now, here's Fern Young coming down the line on his freight train to sign off the show as he usually does. So long, everybody.